Welcome to Wise Women's Pride, where we explore the many seasons of womanhood.
And the archetypes, the Pride Sisters, that guide us through them.
So grab a snack, get cozy, and join
the conversation. I love that.
Maybe we should keep that.
Yes.
Today we begin with a quiet theme, listening to the whisper. Before desire becomes a decision or plan, it often begins as curiosity, a feeling, or a small inner voice saying, pay attention to this. So today, Lourdes and I are exploring how desire first appears in our lives and what it means to trust those early signals of who we are becoming. So the theme essentially is how desire speaks softly before it speaks clearly. Okay. So,
And
Lord,
of course, that's tied to the archetype
yes.
of the maiden.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for keeping me on task. So let's talk about that a little bit first before we move forward. So we are starting with the maiden. She is the beginning of our cycle of the archetypes, right? The maiden represents curiosity, exploration, being the student, right? Just like approaching life from a position of curiosity and just welcoming, not knowing, and owning that and being okay with it, right? You want to add what you want to say?
No, I just always think of the maiden as the novice, but in the
Yes.
true sense of the word, the one that sees life every single day through new lenses. And there's something beautiful about that.
There's something very beautiful about that.
There's just, we can all get lost in this idea of certainty, this false idea of security. I was going to say seguridad. And the maiden says, wait a second, that was yesterday. Today, right? Today, all of this is possible. And I love, 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 love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And so we always talk about how these archetypes aren't necessarily, something that we experience chronologically.
Correct.
They're constantly coming up in our lives. So, and I've said this in other episodes where the maiden is always in us whenever we're starting a new project. When we have things end, we get so distraught, right? But it's an opportunity to start something new. And that's the maiden, right? And so if we can embrace those moments and look at it as something's ended, but something new is starting, and recognize I'm in the maiden stage again. I'm experiencing this. And be okay with that. We don't always have to be the expert. We don't always have to know the answers. And the maiden really gives us permission to not know and be okay with it. I love the maiden for that reason, and I think sometimes we're so stuck on wanting to be the expert.
It's beautiful, Jeanette, that we know we have elders in our lives that are consistently in the maiden stage. And it seems almost like we return to that, right? The older we get, we go through the maiden and then we become mothers in many ways. And then we become these wise crones. But then there's a return to the newness of life. There's a return to, wait, I've missed out on the honing in on the beauty of things, right? Honing in on the mystery of things. And that mystery also has to do with our inner selves. And that's why I love that idea of before anything becomes clear, it starts as a whisper. It just starts with like a little voice inside of us. And how do we tap into that?
Into that.
Yeah. How do
So
we
today-
recognize that?
Yeah, how do we recognize that voice? So today we're talking about, can you hear the whisper? Is there a whisper? Are you allowing yourself to hear it, right? And leaning into that whisper. What's it telling you? The maiden is always asking questions. What's being asked. And so we're starting our podcast. This is, I guess, officially episode 2 because we did one, right? But we're starting season 3 and we're starting with the maiden. We're going into spring season. We're in March, which is the month, Women's Month. right? So I
Mhm.
think it's just so perfect to start with her and to restart. We're starting it new again, big. We're
Yeah.
now made a season again of the podcast. And so we're starting again. We're starting something new again. Even though we've done this, it's new. We're coming to this point different. We've
Yeah.
experienced things, we've had highs and lows, and we're opening that door again with the podcast and welcoming others to join us again, right? So we're in our maiden stage again with Wise Women's Pride.
Right.
And so the question is, so I want to ask you, Lourdes, when you hear listening to the whisper, what comes up for you?
My God. I think for me, it's the real voice. It's the real me. It's the unapologetic, unabashedly curious woman that is always inside of me. And what I do really good, or what I've done really good at, is keeping that quiet, keeping her silent. And what I've learned as the seasons have passed is that that's really me, that fearlessness, that, but what if we do things differently? But what if this time around it will work? What if I try painting today? What would happen? And there's a there's a sense of joy in all of that, right? But we have to be able to be courageous enough to listen to that voice, and I'm beginning to be extremely fearless and protective of that voice. I love that. And sure enough, that those little whispers do become a clear path. Very quick example, going into that program of finally getting my therapy license. That was something I had toyed with in 12, 14 years ago. And there was always this, but there's no money in it. There's like, but wait, there's like all of these loops and certifications, and I have to make more money, and I have to, and always the logical person. But to have finally put all of that aside and said, here I am, I'm going to go in, it became so clear. It became like, oh, here's the path that has been waiting for you all
Yeah.
the time.
Oh, I love that. And I love that you're saying, you're honoring it.
Hmm.
I think when I think about the whisper, right?
Yeah.
I feel I agree with you. I think that's their essence, right? But I think it's also that's our spiritual connection,
Yes.
you know, um, our connection to God, and I think we're wired to always be curious, right? And to always continue to learn. And I think that when we stop ourselves, we cease to live, and that's one of the reasons why I love the maiden. I think about my grandfather when I think about the maiden because there was a joy to him and there was always a curiosity to him, and so, I mean, men can have the maiden in them too, right?
Of course,
So,
the feminine power is in all of us.
yes. 100%. And so I think of his childlike qualities, and I think that's who the maiden is. It connects us to that child in us, you know, that we lose sometimes because we get bitter and jaded with life. And so the maiden kind of reminds us to not be that way. And so I associate that whisper, you know, coming from the divine, right? And that's our connection. And so when we honor it, when we listen to
Mm,
it brings us to our authentic selves that you're talking about, right? To that core being in who we are beyond all of our identities, right? The core of who you are, Lourdes.
yeah,
That's who's talking to you. So, you know, listening to the whisper um is essential for reconnecting with ourselves, I
that's right.
feel. Yeah.
And
So
yet so difficult to do. So many of us don't know
yeah.
where to begin, like, and
Yeah.
and we've lost touch with it. Like, even if we do hear it, we won't hear it. And where does it
Yeah.
come from? And am I supposed to be sleeping? Am I supposed to be very quiet sitting in this chair? Am I supposed to be in conversations with my priest or with my guru? What am I supposed to be doing to hear this voice? And it's okay to not know, right? I think that sometimes when you are at the most, and this is making me remember of a reminding me of a David White poem, but the I think when you're most lost is when you're on the right path. That sounds so, paradoxical, but I think it's true.
Yeah.
I think when you can't see the road ahead, I think that's when you're onto something, right? Because you've always brought up the chrysalis, you've always brought up the root finding its way through the dark dirt to finally come out and blossom into an oak tree. You've brought up these nature connections, and I think that in order to get to the light, we need to go through the darkness.
Yes, yes,
So
for
funny.
sure. I also think I think that the whisper, right, is an invitation to
Mm,
the in between, right? An
love it.
invitation to the in
Yes.
between, to that time of just being, to that liminal space, to that in between of what was, right, and what can be.
Mhm.
And I think that in between space can be scary for people because there is uncertainty in it.
Or when you said that, I envisioned the carnal, the here, and the spiritual, the over there. When in reality, it's not even over there, right? It's always in us. But that realm between that of the higher self and that which we place small in this idea that we are not connected to the higher self, that we are not connected to the again, that Native American, that the West Coast, First Nation people of Washington. There was this poem about David White, talks about it in one of his interviews, about trusting where you are when you're lost in the woods. And he mentions how if you do not see the road in front of you, you do not see the path, you are surely on the right path. And that you must not feel scared when you're lost. The forest knows who you are. All you have to say is here. And if you get lost, it will remind you that you're here.
Mhm.
And it's a beautiful poem. It's no more than I think 16 lines, but it's this reminder of listen to sit still and listen to what is around you, and it will show you the way. And I'm sure there are many religious connections there. You can find literature in the Bible and the Quran and other religious writings, but I think it's as simple as that. There's just something I love that you said it's being connected between the there and that, the spiritual and the non,
Mhm.
the yesterday and the now. I love that.
Yeah. I think you need to bring that poem for our next episode.
Definitely making a note.
Share it, share it. So I want to talk about, well, two things. Why sometimes we ignore the whisper, right? Or why we don't hear it. Because some people might be listening to this and say, what are these two locas talking about right now? Que voice ni voice. I don't hear any voice. Are they hearing voices? Are they schizophrenic? Like, what are they talking about?
Right.
So some of us don't hear it at all, right?
Right.
Or some of us hear it and we choose not to acknowledge it or listen to it, right?
Yes.
So let's talk about, which one do you want to talk about first?
Oh
Those
my
who hear
goodness.
it and
Uh,
ignore it, or the ones who don't?
let's explain it first for those who are like saying, "What are you talking about?" You know, those that say, "I don't listen to anything." You know, I listen to the radio when I wake up, and it's like, I don't know. What are you talking about?
Yeah. So, I mean, the voice is essentially, it can be described depending on what where your values are in terms of
Mhm.
how, what your spiritual values and what your spiritual grounding. For me, sometimes I see the voice as my core self talking to me, right? Sometimes I see the voice as the spiritual divine talking to me. And sometimes they're one and the same, right?
Mhm.
And sometimes I even see it as my ancestors talking to me. And I
Mhm.
think so for me to describe how I can tell the difference, that's another conversation for another day.
Yep.
But I think it's essentially a voice that anchors me, that guides me. And that can be different, In the bigger picture, I would say that it's the spirit, the divine. My connection to the divine and connecting to that source. And it appears in different ways.
The only thing I would add to that
That's just my perspective,
the only
right?
thing
And
I
so
would
what
add
do
to that,
Yeah.
Jeanette, is that and I love the latter because I think maybe unintentionally you did that, but intentionally it happened. Inner self, spiritual ancestors. It's also that anchor, that voice, that grounding based on, like you said, whatever your cultural connections are. To me, it's instinct. It's an instinct. It's that thing that
Tuition.
yes.
Yes.
It's that thing that says, not safe. You should go. Not today. Retreat. Be still.
Still, this
Don't
isn't
say
a healthy
anything.
relationship.
Don't say anything. Why am I talking? Right?
Yeah.
Why am I? Wait. It's that voice that says, go now, jump. So it's that voice where we fear if I listen, people are going to judge me. People are not going to know why I've done such a thing. Why am I? Am I doubting myself? Am I crazy? But some of us are so comfortable with our bodies and where we are, with our spirit bodies, that we are comfortable in obeying that instinct, in obeying that, listening very clearly to that inner voice. And usually it's very tied to that child that we were. It's tied to that maiden. It's tied to that young person that is full of life and wants to do the right, or wants to be healthy, wants to not be in danger. So I think it's a grounding voice, right? Just like you said,
Yeah,
that anchor.
that anger. So, why do you think people choose not to listen to it sometimes? I think that's an easier question than the other one.
Yes. Yeah.
Why don't we listen to it sometimes? I can speak for myself. Sometimes it tells me something I don't want to do, right?
Yep.
Or sometimes it tells me something that I don't believe is possible, right? And so that can be one and the same. If I don't think it's possible, I don't want to do it, right? So it kind of like freezes me. And I think that's tied to like how I'm seeing myself and my abilities. So I think sometimes we don't listen because we're afraid, right?
Mhm.
I'm gonna go over some other ones, but I want to know, that was just for me. What is it for you when you
I
have to
think
listen to it?
similarly, it challenges me. It challenges and it takes me out of my comfort zone. And that is when
Mm.
I choose not to, right? Because nobody wants to be uncomfortable. Nobody wants to do it the hard way, right? We always want the easy path most of the time. And I think it's when I choose not to, it's because something else is riding on me being me staying exactly where I am. That could be my reputation, that could be money, that could be relationships,
Mm.
keeping ties that I know need to be broken, that I know should have clearer boundaries. And yet, that voice, I go, no, 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 no. Don't ruin what I have here.
Don't mess this up.
Yes.
I'm all done up.
Yeah. Learn my lines. Leave me alone.
I got this rehearsed, right?
Yes.
I've set this up. Yes, I've packaged this, right? It's messing with our construct
Correct.
of what we think we're supposed to be.
Correct.
That we've worked so hard. Those are the hardest times to listen to it. And I think so fear of change, lies doubt in ourselves,
Mhm.
right? Oh, that's not realistic. I can't do that, Um, judgment, which you mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Fear of if I follow this, what are others going to think of me? What am I going to think of me? Right? Will I be successful? Will I fail? Emotional projection, right? So caring deeply means risking disappointment or rejection. So I'm not going to do this because it's too much of an emotional surrender, basically. Like,
Absolutely.
what happens if it doesn't work out? Or, I'll be vulnerable and hurt.
That security, right? That we are so afraid of letting go of, that certainty that we are so afraid of letting go of.
Yeah. And then just being so disconnected from ourselves that we just feel like, oh, I got too many other things, right? Not prioritizing ourselves. So not putting ourselves in the center and fulfilling everyone else's needs. So those are, I feel, I don't know if I'm left anything out, Fig, that I feel like people will choose to ignore it. So many times I've worked with clients and it's like, I always tell, I believe we know what to do, right? We just don't believe enough in ourselves to do it. I always feel my clients have the answers inside. My job is just to kind of like nudge them. Look, you know this. You know, what's stopping you? Let me help you get the courage to move forward. So we often know what to do and we choose not to do it and we wind up, you know, getting ourselves in a hole.
Because we're used to listening to direction. We're used to being delegated to. We're used to saying, "Stop, go, pause, continue." So sometimes we just need to hear it from somebody else, even though we've always had it inside of us, you know? And then that'll give us the, "Oh, well, if it doesn't work, I can always blame it on the person that said it," even though that's the thing I've always thought of.
Yeah. So let's talk about the people who don't hear it.
My goodness. Delusionals.
I think for those that aren't hearing any whisper, for those that aren't hearing any grounding voice, which is in here, right? But sometimes there's so much noise that we're disconnected from it. You know, I would say I would challenge anyone who feels like they're not hearing any whisper, they're not hearing, is because you're not stilling yourself enough
Yeah,
to to hear what's being said to you. You know, perhaps you don't have any practice at all
yeah,
that's allowing you that pathway to reconnect to that. So anyone that feels like they're not, would, you know, I would challenge them to find some mindful means of
yeah.
reconnecting to themselves and stilling themselves. And it doesn't have to be sitting down, oh, you know, like it
Oh,
doesn't have
no.
to be like that kind of meditative thing. Like sometimes it's movement, but just
Yeah.
like being in that silence with yourself, with your body, and opening yourself and inviting that conversation to happen.
I mean, I think about how much are you carrying? How much are you believing in what you have as a role or what you're called as or what your identity is? How much of that are you married to that when you're alone with yourself, you don't ever take that mask off? You don't know your real face because you're serving so many things outside of you
Hmm.
that when it comes down to who are you, you don't know what the answer is.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else you think in terms of those that are listening that you feel not listening, those that can't hear
I can't
or
hear. I think maybe tell me if I'm wrong, maybe fear? Maybe a little fear of what is the truth, and nobody feels comfortable with taking chances sometimes. I don't know. It's, ask yourself, what are you afraid of?
yeah. So I would challenge them to find moments of stillness. I think they might be too busy. I think they might be too caught up in the idea that I would say change your lens. Like you might be
Huh.
feeling like, this is not a thing or, so I would challenge those people to have an open mind, to lean into the maiden, right?
Yes.
Openness and asking questions. I think maybe they need to ask some questions and give themselves permission to ask the questions, right? So like what quiet longing have they been ignoring? And when did it first appear? When did that longing first appear? Go back to like what what's being unfulfilled in you.
Yes. I'm already picturing some people I know that need to hear this, actually. What are you afraid? Let's just start with a very simple question. What are you afraid of? What are you carrying that no longer belongs to you? Or what have you been carrying that never belonged to you?
Mhm.
Right? Like, what is keeping you from really being your authentic self?
Yeah. And what small step could you take this week to honor that whisper?
Mhm.
What small step could you take this week? You know, does it mean like a 2-minute moment of silence? Like there's so many meditation apps out there. And there's different ones like there's Christian meditation, there's Buddhist meditation. Like there is
Absolutely. Okay,
something for
meditation
everyone.
is not for you. What about writing? Is writing your
Writing. Writing can be
and I don't
really
even and I don't even mean like a journal. I mean make a list. Yes, you know,
yeah.
what, good, bad, red, blue, yellow, walk, dog, birds. I mean, just make a list. I don't care what list it is. It could even be your shopping list. Start making a list. And then eventually, I think those words will become more fluid. You'll be able to make sense of it. You'll be able to make some sentences about what it is that you're trying to
Yeah.
find is the obstacle between you and your intuition.
And I think that's something that everyone can do, you know, like ask yourself the questions, be open, invite the dialogue with yourself, right? Invite open the door to that and open the door to the possibility. And all of that can be done by, like I said before, leaning into the archetype of the maiden, allowing yourself to be a maiden and say, okay, I'm going to just be open. I'm
Yeah.
going to be curious about myself, see where I'm at. Right? I think that's awesome. I think
Yeah.
we could close here.
I think we need to.
I think we need to. So just to wrap up, so desire really begins with the whisper, a quiet, a quiet nudge towards a new possibility, you know? And so you wanna try to be open to what can become, to what can be. And the more we learn to listen, the clearer that voice becomes. So we're going to close with an affirmation.
Please.
Yes. So the affirmation is I trust the quiet longing within me. I honor the whisper of my becoming. I'm going to say it one more time. I trust the quiet longing within me. I honor the whispers of my becoming. And that can be the beginning of the invitation to that dialogue, that internal dialogue that we can have.
Beautiful. Well, that just made me think about a lot of things, Jeanette. Maybe next time we meet, I want to share something visual. I'm a very visual learner. I'd like to think about, I definitely will bring up poem, and there's a painting that comes to mind I'd like to share. So
Okay.
let's end there, but I love that affirmation. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, everyone. We'll see you next week. Yay! Second episode.
Second episode.
All
I
right. Bye.